It's gotta be advanced cock that Gaban used on Summers in that last scene. That's why it's taken Oda so long for the other combatants to join as well. Advanced cock is not the solution that I expected to this, but then again, we are talking about the missionary of love here. I'm very 50-50 about whether or not I'd be happy with the solution to this problem just being Haki again. For most of the New World era, it's been a series of encounter problem and then develop stronger Haki to solve said problem. So I am hoping that the Abyss presents something just a little bit different, but then again, it does entirely depend on the nature of what the Abyss even is. At the moment, we're linking it to Emu, and unless he is some sort of truly ancient supernatural being, then that would also point to this being the effect of a devil fruit. Emu's perhaps devil fruit, in which case a Haki counter does make a very standard amount of sense. But also, if just using Conqueror's Haki was the solution, then surely Luffy may have figured that out during Egghead Island, where he was fighting against 5 regenerating monster beasts. He can use Advanced Conqueror's Haki as well, so there does have to be something a bit more to this. Maybe Luffy is he just still doesn't quite understand exactly what it is he's doing. But also, maybe that something more has to do specifically with the kind of Haki that Joy Boy used. Because when Emmett released the Haki not on Egghead Island, it sent the other 4 elders back to Marijois, which I suppose implies that it dispelled, or at least briefly dispelled, the effects of the Abyss. Either way, something that I do love is Summers' reaction to Scopper Gaban. It is so over the top, and you know what? It gives me infinitely more respect for Kizaru. When Dark King Rayleigh rocked up on somebody, Kizaru was all like, "Ooh, Suriba's Rayri." And then he proceeded to tank the right-hand man of the Pirate King, whereas Saint Summers has completely physically and, more importantly, mentally collapsed. And this may be because Summers has some history with Mr. Scopper Gaban, which you would have to assume happened during the God Valley incident, as it's the only known point in history that we have so far where both the Roger Pirates and the Holy Knights were in the same location. But this is the kind of reaction that, say, Warpaw would have to seeing Luffy again. Just the sight of that straw-hatted lad would send him straight into PTSD. But if it wasn't clear before, it's gotta be pretty impossible to see Saint Summers as the main antagonist of this arc now. That, or it's gotta be pretty difficult to see Elbaf as an arc that's going to last too much longer. It was his right arm. I know it's confusing from the first panel, but the final one shows his right arm amputated. So weirdly enough, in this chapter, Saint Summers gets both his left and his right arm cut off, because it changes depending on which panel you're looking at. In the initial panel with the initial cut, yes, you can see his left hand flying right off there, which makes sense because people tend to only lose their left arms in one piece. However, in the final panel, it is definitely Summers' right hand that is missing, which is a pretty big continuity error from Oda there. This isn't the kind of thing that you could blame one of the assistants on, like all of the early Elbaf errors within the clothing and the weapons. And I do think it's really strange that no one picked up on this, given that both of these panels are on the same page, right next to each other. But then again, I didn't notice it at first either, but then again, I wasn't the one drawing it. And I feel like if I was spending a whole day on this page, maybe I would have picked it up. Maybe. So I guess we'll figure out exactly which arm he's missing in the next chapter. But the real question here is, where is the mark of the Abyss on Saint Summers? Because if it just so happened to be on the arm that Scopper Gaban sliced off, left and or right, then that is a big problem for Summers, as he won't be able to get off Elbaf, at least not via the Abyss. He'd have to travel in a much more conventional boat method, and now that Scopper Gaban has arrived, I'm not sure that Summers has the patience or frankly the lifespan for that. Alright, this is the part of the video where I show off my prized Sabo underwear. They are size LL, which I will say is not quite as L as a man of my size requires, but today this contains Raid Shadow Legends. What are you doing in my Sabo underwear? We all know you're a crazy good game. Yes, you are. That is clear. But look, I'm sensing that today isn't about that. Because today I am very proud to be partnering with Raid in their endeavor to give back to the planet. For every new user who downloads the game through my link and plays to level 20, Raid will be donating 1 impact point towards planting trees. Trees are very important to me. They produce a substance called oxygen, which is apparently very important. And because of that, mate, I would do unspeakable things to have even 1 extra tree. victory in this world. And I'd also do a lot of things I can speak about, like downloading this frustratingly good game, and since it's Raid 6 anniversary, they will be doubling the points at the end of the month. So if 50 players reach level 20, that is 100 impact points, and in a month's time, I'll be updating you all with how much we managed to accomplish. So to participate, you can and definitely should download Raid through my link in the description or scan the QR code on screen, and in doing so, you will immediately receive a huge starter pack with epic champion Tagoar, and you'll also get another starter pack after hitting level 15 with an epic Fayne, and please use the special promo code TreeHugger to receive the legendary champion Green Warden Rurak, who has a face in his chest and a face in his face. And both new and existing players can get even more stuff with 2 more promo codes that are in the description. And feel free to come find me under the name Grandline Review and join my clan. So please do check out Raid and contribute to the cause. Great game, great cause, love trees. But for now, it's back to you, me. If left arms are the only ones lost in One Piece, does that essentially confirm Scopper is going to die, as he's the left arm of the Pirate King? Look, the only answer I have to that is yes, very yes. And not just very yes, but given the history of other left arms in this series, Scopper Gaban is going to die in an extremely brutal way. And this may also mean quite a violent death for Sanji as the left wing of the next Pirate King. It is not a good place to stand. In pro wrestling, they work the left side of their opponent. It's a tradition since most people are right-handed, so they don't want to accidentally hurt someone's dominant hand. I see. So Oda is a massive wrestling fan, which has never been more evident than it is now on Elbaf, where most giants are directly named after pro wrestlers. So it's not out of the question that this is the philosophy he follows when maiming his characters as well. 3 straight chapter and Loki and Luffy's group still having picnic? Yeah, it is starting to feel like it's not just Oda who gets to take breaks from the manga anymore. Apparently, his characters have unionized and they've decided when they get to take time off as well. And given that Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji have the highest amount of star power, it would be pretty difficult not to give in to their demands. And you know what? At the very least, this is an interesting way to experience One Piece because this idea isn't unusual, but what is odd is the exact characters who are being sidelined. As usually, we are all about the Luffys, the Zoros, and the Sanjais, whilst the Robins, the Frankais, and the Choppers and everyone else disappear for a smoko for very, very long strings of chapters. Although I think the hardest part of all of this is Loki. I'm much less concerned about not seeing too much of Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji, but I really want to see more of Loki because I just feel that's where the actual story is. The Holy Knights are great and they're concocting cockery and everything, but until we bring Loki back into things, it is a bit hard to shake the feeling that Elbaf itself is on a bit of a break. Gunko wearing pants after being rejected by Brook is one of my favorite details in this fantastically packed chapter. Alright, I almost went insane when I saw this comment because I did not recall seeing pants on Gunko, and I would like to think that I am very well trained at spotting pants. And as it turns out, I was right, but also so was the commenter, because they may have been reading the Arabic translation, and for that localization, they give Gunko pants for fairly obvious reasons. But it's not just Gunko, no, pants for everyone. Nami also has pants, and I'm just going to go ahead and assume that most women in the Arabic One Piece world adopt pants. But here's where some more potential for confusion arises from. Due to reasons that I'm not entirely sure of myself, Arabic One Piece leaks are usually the first to come out. They get the pages and their scan groups are so unbelievably fast, which means that sometimes what the English scan groups do, right, is they use the cleaned up Arabic pages. And so from time to time, the unofficial English translations contain these little Arabic edits. So that's that mystery solved, although it would be a pretty funny gag for Gunko's panty dream to be broken and to throw a pant tantrum, if you will. I also can't help but feeling that Chopper staying put may prove decisive later on. His role so far has been rather unusual. I don't know about that. It honestly hasn't been all that unusual, not for Chopper anyway. He does tend to get tucked away more so than most Straw Hats, although he is currently the only crew member in the area who is actually free. Jinbei, Brook, Nami, and Usopp were caught by Gunko, and unless Gaban broke the ability, Robin has also been tied up by the Thorns of St. Summers. So it will probably fall to Chopper to free the rest of the crew while Summers is busy wetting himself against Gaban. Ronya's speech makes me remember that something that makes us happy is worth fighting for. I am humbled and happy to be a fan and follower of a story that makes me tear up here and there, looking forward for what is coming. I think that is a very, very important message. This might just be me in my bubble, but I often feel like we human people get rather caught up in fighting against things rather than fighting for things, especially online. Very few people arguing online are actually fighting for something. They're just there to find something to get mad about and fight against. And look, what that thing is doesn't really matter, but with Ronya, Oda has really distilled the idea of fighting for positivity. And this might sound corny as crap, but to me, this is a true warrior. It's not about the size and strength of the punch fist. Not at all. It is about the size and strength of the heart. And I think that little Ronya here is showing the way forward for Elbaf, which isn't about forgetting the culture of fighting that has sustained their civilization for thousands of years, but more about changing why they're fighting and what they're fighting for. As right now we seem to have had a very snap turn away from old tradition because all of the kids apart from Colin despise violence in any form, so maybe now is the perfect time to figure out that marriage between old and new. And while we're here, it's also been brought to my attention that Ronya is likely based on Ronja Rövardotter. This is a Swedish children's fantasy book that was even adapted into an anime, but fairly recently actually. It aired in 2014. So I'd never heard of this myself, but apparently it is a very prominent book, and it's also been turned into a live-action TV show as well as a stage musical. But what's relevant to us is that part of this story involves a game of jumping across a chasm. And during this game, Ronya saves another child who almost falls. So what Ronya's doing here is very true to the literaric inspiration. Ronya, under threat of a fall, is choosing to save the happiness of the other kids. And it makes me wonder if all of these Elbaf children are based on other kids' stories. We already have at least 2 of the kids having been inspired by Vicky the Viking. So if anyone knows the origin of the other Elbaf children, please do leave it in the comments because this kind of stuff really fascinates me. Mostly because I find it incredible that Eiichiro Oda not only has the time to consistently make the world's greatest weekly manga series, but he also seems to have the time to conduct all of this exhaustive research into all of these different stories across different cultures and incorporate key elements of them into One Piece. I just don't see how all of this is possible. There's only 24 hours in a day, and yeah, even though he only sleeps for about 3 hours, even 21 hours a day still doesn't seem like enough time to make all of this happen. Hey, it's me on a thumbnail. That's right, Mr. Gaban, you've been on a lot of my thumbnails recently, which usually indicates that you are the most excitable and YouTube-friendly character in the thumbnail. Keep up the good work. Remember Garp's lesson about who to save between an old man and a child. It hits different when you think about it in this situation. It hits very different because you're heavily changing the stakes of Garp's conundrum. In Garp's hypothetical, there was only one old man and one child, and he said without question you save the child and you leave that old man to die. But what Summers has set up here is a choice between one child and tens of thousands of old people. In fact, with Elbaf and Ohara, we have 2 whole civilizations worth of voices on the line here being stacked up against that single child. And to his credit, Jarl makes the decision that Garp would have, and the philosophy that Garp tried to instill into his Marines. But of course, Ronya then went and made the exact same decision that Koby did. In response to Garp's problem, Koby claimed that he would sacrifice himself to allow both the child and the old man to live, which was the conclusion that Ronya landed on. The idea that the best solution was to sacrifice herself to allow everyone else to be happy. So we have quite an interesting cross-cultural generational divide, and I can only hope that things turn out much better on Elbaf than they did on Hachinosu, because in the end, Koby did have to leave Garp behind. Even if they burn the library, Vegapunk has all the knowledge in his big brain. Right, I've been seeing this or a variation on this comment a lot, and it is true. All of the books on Ohara are in the Vega brain, but Punk Records has currently disappeared from the world. The 4 satellites who are crammed into one fusion body said that they would effectively be the gatekeepers of this knowledge until a day comes where humanity is actually capable of, quote, wrangling it themselves. And Shaka then estimated that it would take 500 years to reach that point. So that's quite a few years. And so I'm not sure if we can afford to lose the Owl Library here. But it's not even about that. It's not about the knowledge itself. It's about the fact that these schools and these libraries bring happiness to people. That's more the core of what we're fighting for here rather than the contents of the library, which is why it is even more important that we keep these buildings. I thought for sure you would talk about how we got another classic pirate thing, walking the plank. Yeah, look, I didn't even pick up on that. But this is very classic Oda subversion. For most of One Piece, the impression has been that pirates are the bad guys, and the Straw Hats, as well as some others, have slowly been flipping that impression into something that resembles more heroicness. And now what we have here are the enemies of the pirates using a stereotypical pirate device to portray evil. Seeing Scopper Gaban that kind of serious actually makes me realize we've never seen Roger serious like that. Crazy to imagine the aura the man must have had. You know, that's not something I've ever thought about. The Roger we've always seen, and look, I mean this in the best of ways, the Roger we've always seen has been a bit one note. We've never really seen him pushed to the brink or out of his comfort zone like we have with Luffy, and I think that is very much on purpose. Because when it comes to Roger, we're not really following a man so much as we're following a legend. And so keeping Roger very consistently in this joyous adventure mode makes him feel much larger than life, like a mythical archetype rather than a more identifiable human. It's also worth mentioning that this is an era that Luffy has just entered. After Gear 5th, we've seen a pretty massive reduction in his serious dramatic emotions, because now that he's achieved this level of freedom, he's just free to enjoy the adventure. And that is the form that we usually see Roger in as well, not a literal Gear 5th, but most of what we see of Roger is after he's reached the peak of the world. He still has his rivals like Shiki and Whitebeard, but most of what we see of Roger features exercising the level of freedom that Luffy really wants to. And come to think of it, this is very much Luffy's prelude to Pirate King era. The Luffy that we're seeing right now is the equivalent of the Roger we saw in Oden's flashback, and their personalities are strikingly similar. Mr. Internet Man, if I were the Holy Knights, I'd perhaps be a little more concerned about the Emperor sleeping in the basement. They've managed to hit a 3 for 3 of things that pissed Luffy off. They're hurting Robin, they've made Nami cry, and they've attacked the people who fed him. Yeah, I have to be real here. I have no idea what the Holy Knights are even thinking at this point. All of them are terrified of the idea of confronting Luffy, but they're not doing anything to not confront him. By now, they have half of his crew captured, and quite frankly, it's not the half that you would like to have captured. Most of them are not the half that you need to truly be worried about. And also, you would have to assume that the Holy Knights didn't know that Scopper Gaban was living on Elbaf. They probably haven't been to this island at all in 5 to 6 decades, because they were all quite surprised at the cultural shift. So it must come as quite a shock to discover the left arm of the Pirate King is setting up shop here. So at what point do they either retreat or call for help? Because even if Summer still had 2 hands, this would be getting out of hands. At this stage, we've got to be betting on seeing killing him. He's the only one that has yet to really show himself in direct combat, so maybe he is their trump card in these kind of situations. Can we talk about Ulti's cape? We sure can, because this is actually a pretty big deal. Ulti is currently cloaked in what appears to be the symbol of the Kozuki clan, and I'd wager that page 1 probably has one as well. And Ulti's even performing a very polite bow. So these two have made their full transition and are now vassals of Yamato, who is carrying on the will of Odin, and therefore they are Kozuki vassals. It's almost like the next generation of Odin's vassals. And Yamato's also been given an Amigasa to take to Kawamatsu and Hakumai, which is our next stop and the second last destination on our Wano tour. That's also where Yamato will be laying Yasuo's sword to rest. And after that, there's only one stop left, which is Ringo, which is where I think we'll finally see Kiku. She's probably the daimyo of Ringo, which is where Izo was buried, so that makes a lot of sense. But after that, bam, we have completed our journey across Wano. And from there, Yamato's gonna need to make a decision. Because after that, this was the point in Odin's journey where he gathered enough vassals to be named daimyo of his own territory, which was the then unlawful zone of Kuri. But all of Wano is currently spoken for, well, except for one territory. I know that it's currently underwater, but perhaps Yamato could be named the daimyo of Onigashima, or whatever the original name of that island was. I think it's interesting that they specifically pointed out that if Bronya fell, she'd be falling down to the underworld. There are people we know down there after all, and it's not totally out of the question for Luffy to giant up and catch a falling kid from the sky. It does feel like we're definitely setting up for one of the kids to fall and to be saved by the group that are currently in the underworld. And mate, especially if it's Luffy, just think of the symbolism in that. A de-wielding demon emerges from the underworld. That is Gunko's worst nightmare right there. A devil from the underworld coming to destroy everything that the Holy Knights are charged with maintaining. And not just one devil, no, we are looking at potential multi-devils here, with the fire demon Diablo Jumbo that is Sanji, the self-proclaimed self-proclaimed king of hell that is Zoro, and Loki, who doesn't even need any other fancy names or titles, because that is how much of a demon he is. All of the most terrifying people are right there below them, and the Holy Knights are unknowingly goading all of these demons by sending kids falling down to them. So I can only wait in eager anticipation for the Holy Knights to realize just what a huge mistake it is they've made. And thanks so much again to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring this video. Definitely check them out through the link in the description.